This Saturday marks the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. In the U.S., trans people in particular have seen a major rollback of their rights under the Trump administration. On his first day in office, the U.S. president signed an executive order saying that the government would only recognize two sexes, male and female, part of a broad attack on what he calls gender ideology that's seen the U.S. ban transgender people from the military and force them to list their sex at birth on legal documents like passports. Well, today we're going to hear from someone who's both been personally impacted and who's fighting back. Lazarus Orr is an activist and one of a group of people suing the Trump administration over that passport policy. He joins us from West Virginia. Thank you for staying up so late to speak with us. Can you just start by explaining more about the changes made under the Trump administration and how the passport policy in particular has impacted you?
Yes. First of all, thank you also so much for having me on this evening. So what we are seeing right now under the Trump administration is just a slew of attacks upon the trans community. And these attacks are nothing more than just a selfish attempt to divide and distract us. We are seeing these orders like the passport issue for what they are. And they are an attempt by hateful extremists to make it impossible for us trans people to participate in public life. From our jobs to schools and to healthcare, to access to public facilities, sports, and justice for incarcerated people, the Trump administration wants to deny the existence of trans, non-binary, intersex people and make life harder for people who are simply just trying to exist and live our lives. So, right now what we are seeing is just the trans community. We are understandably angry and anxious, but the reality is we have always been here and we are not going to go anywhere. And we are ready to continue this fight that we are in right now. And the American people are just so tired of the endless cycle of petty and destructive politics. So rather than scapegoating us trans people, right now what we need in America is an administration that is willing to actually work for the people and not fuel these culture wars.
And just sort of concretely, so people can really, understand the actual impact that this has, on people's lives. What has the impact been for you about the passport? I mean, I understand that you applied for a new passport back in January. Can you just share a bit about your experience?
Yeah. So, ahead of the Trump administration taking over, I did go ahead and renew my passport. And unfortunately, my passport was withheld. And like other trans Americans, I did run into issues receiving my passport back. And that is why, I did eventually take legal action with the ACLU to push back against this hatred. Because again, right now, what we are seeing is the Trump administration and his allies continuing to stoke this fear and scapegoat the trans communities when our leaders should be addressing challenges that are actually impacting all of us. Again, not these culture wars. So one thing that, I'm really hoping to show here, especially with my work at Advocates for Trans Equality, is trans, non-binary, intersex people, we are living proudly all across this country. And there is absolutely nothing that Donald Trump or his allies can do to change that.
Some people might say, at the end of the day, it is just a piece of paper, a passport. Can you explain, why that is so important to you?
Yeah, receiving a passport that misgenders you, it's not just a bureaucratic mistake. That is a fundamental rejection of one's identity and our existence. And without a passport that accurately reflects one's gender, international travel becomes this minefield of humiliation, invasive scrutiny, and the risk of being denied entry at borders. And that is something that myself and other trans people who are in this situation are fearful for. And again, that is why so many of us, especially at the Advocates for Trans Equality, we are prepared to use every resource at our disposal, be it from Capitol Hill to the courts, to push back against this and remain in solidarity with our community and defend against these attacks.
And this legal case actually bears your name, Orr v. Trump. What are you hoping to achieve by going to court? Do you hope this will go all the way to the Supreme Court?
At the end of the day, given what we are seeing with these recent executive orders that are restricting the freedom to move within the trans community, all I am hoping for is to receive that we can all receive passports, because these are essential documents for travel, identification, and even employment verification. And restricting gender marker changes forces trans people and to situations where our identity is being questioned or invalidated. So at the end of the day, I am hoping that we are able to move through the courts, that the courts will see that we are in fact being discriminated against, and that we will be able to, have access to accurate identification so we can continue to have that freedom to move around the world as freely as possible.
And I believe that your case did see an initial victory in a district court. Can you maybe just tell us what the latest is and what the next steps are going to be?
So, that's something, unfortunately, I cannot speak on, as, I do not have an attorney present surrounding this case right now. But I can say that, we are going to continue to do everything that we can to make sure that all trans people in America have the ability to obtain accurate identification and to have that freedom to move around the world.
All right, we'll just have to keep a lookout for any updates. Trans people are a very small minority in the U.S. A 2022 study found that they make up less than 1% of the population. Why do you think that transgender rights have become such a hot button issue, both in the U.S. and in other Western countries like the U.K.?
Again, what we are seeing is truly just hatred and trans community being scapegoated. As I mentioned earlier, trans folks are everywhere. We have always been here and we are not going anywhere. So while the Trump administration and other countries that are, introducing anti-trans initiatives, while they are continuing to stir this fear around the trans community, again, our leaders need to be focused on solving the real issues that are impacting all of us, not just fueling these culture wars for political gain. Trans people are not a threat. We are your friends, we're your coworkers, we're your family members, we are your neighbors, and we are living our lives with honesty and courage, simply seeking the freedom to exist and thrive just like anyone else.
And aside from, the executive orders and concrete legal changes from Donald Trump, do you find that the cultural atmosphere in the United States has changed at all since he took office?
I do think that we are seeing a lot more hostility from some of our leaders in office right now, especially underneath the Donald Trump administration. But we are also seeing such a wonderful growth within our community with our allies. We are really seeing, a lot of strength and solidarity from our ally communities as well as within our own communities. And that just goes to show, again, that in reality, despite what we are hearing about these anti-trans narratives from the Donald Trump administration, trans people are so deeply rooted in the fabric of this nation. We are building families, we are contributing to our communities, and we are showing up every day with resilience and pride. So again, what we need from our leaders is not this division, but direction. And we deserve a government that stands for all Americans, and that includes trans people.
And clearly there is, for whatever reason, still just a lot of fear, I suppose, from people. I mean, transphobia, fear, right? What is maybe one thing that you wish people would understand about what it's like to be trans? It's kind of one message that could help change people's minds.
Yeah, again, we are simply trying to live our lives just like everyone else. Again, trans people, we are your friends, we're your neighbors, we're your colleagues. We are trying our best to just live our lives freely, just as everyone else.
All right, well, we'll be keeping an eye on your case. Ash Lazarus Orr, thank you again so much for staying up late to speak with us here on France 24. Again, that's Ash Lazarus Orr, an activist suing the Trump administration over its passport policy.